We know there's a need for affordable housing. We know that you're all in that space and working to provide housing. So we need to hear what kind of things that we can do from the public side to make that happen so that we can get some people housed on this corridor. And so with that, we've got a couple of speakers and then want to have a really great, robust discussion with y'all once we get into it.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Kyle Angelo from consulting firm HR&A Advisors. We are working on the housing and economic development issues associated with the station area planning for New Bern. I'm going to be talking through sort of a brief presentation on really setting the context for the sort of affordability issues for the context of naturally occurring affordable housing, as well as subsidized affordable housing on the corridor to help frame the subsequent conversations. So, all right, if we can go to the next slide. Sorry. And then share with the people viewing. Sure.
And just so all y'all know, we're doing this both in person and we have people joining online as well. And we have some technology that's hopefully going to make that a little bit more seamless for those of you who are watching from a remote location. But let us know if you have any issues hearing us. And for those of you in person, thanks for your patience.
So first, I just wanted to start with some quick statistics. I suspect many of you are familiar with these trends, if not the exact numbers, but there is significant population growth in Raleigh. There is significant development occurring. Raleigh has, over the past decade, outpaced the U.S. average considerably, not just in growth, but also in appreciation of home values and rents. In terms of pure growth, you see on the graph on the right-hand side of this slide, Raleigh trailed only Austin amongst very large metro areas in the country in terms of population growth over the past decade. If we move to the next slide, we also want to recognize that the city has been proactive in sort of meeting this challenge and putting in place solutions and mechanisms to create more affordable housing. For instance, the city of Raleigh adopting its Penny for Affordable Housing program, and also last year the voters passing an $80 million housing bond. Wake County, HR&A, my company worked with Wake County on its affordable housing plan, which came out several years ago and has launched a variety of initiatives that the county is pursuing. And it's continuing to find sort of additional sources of funding and programs in order to pursue affordable housing. Go to the next slide. One of the key things that the city has done in advance of this planning effort on New Bern, knowing that the BRT is being implemented and knowing that transit investments, high quality transit investments like BRT, like light rail, there is evidence that they can help drive sort of prices higher because they create, sort of connectivity and amenity that is attractive to people who want to live in the corridor, and thus, sort of can increase prices. The city goal in this equitable transit-oriented guidebook is to frame out a set of solutions and policies to try to mitigate these impacts in advance of the transit opening. The city has seen what has happened in other metropolitan areas with similar investments. It's being proactive in putting together, really a suite of solutions that can be implemented in order to, really affect change. To go to the next slide, I want to start by, with that context, talking about both naturally occurring affordable housing and subsidized housing. So, naturally occurring affordable housing, just to make sure we're all sort of using sort of a similar definition, is housing that is not regulated in any way, but happens to have rents that are considered affordable. And when we say affordable, that is sort of the household does not spend more than 30% of their before tax income on Naturally occurring affordable housing, it tends to be older, it tends to be in less expensive neighborhoods. And even the term though, naturally occurring affordable housing, is a bit confusing in the sense that NOAA units are not, necessarily naturally occurring. The market does dictate what happens with these. And when you have an environment where demand is outpacing supply, as is happening now in Raleigh, has happened extensively in some other cities, particularly coastal cities with higher prices generally. Those NOAA units ended up in
Local
price
housing
because
needs.
there's less
Raleigh
supply,
Housing
and they are
Authority
essentially
utilizes
lost
information
as
available
affordable housing.
to the agency, including that provided by
So,
the
if we
consolidated
go to the
plan,
next slide.
information provided by HUD, and
In Raleigh,
analysis.
in Wake
Regional
County,
analysis
Wake
of
County
improvements
has
to fair housing
pretty
patterns
high
and goals
median
below have
incomes
been
in the statewide
identified
context.
using this
The
available data.
sort of rent that is affordable,
According to
the
the
median
current
household
consolidated plan for
and the
City of
median
Raleigh,
household
primary housing
size
barriers for
in
Raleigh's
Wake
low
County
to moderate
is about
income
2 people, a
residents
little more than
are
2
finding
people.
rental
So
housing that is
in
affordable
this
if
chart,
for
looking
sellers
at
for
the rent
naturally
affordable
occurring
to a household of 2,
severe
is about
cost burdens
$1,500.
for very low and
This
extremely
corridor, the
low
New Bern
income
corridor,
households.
that
Once
$1,500
affordable
rent
areas
is
being
not
redeveloped
affordable
into
for the
higher
median
income neighborhoods, market rate or luxury apartments.
lower incomes overall.
Cities lack authority to
We go to the
require
next
set aside
slide.
for affordable housing and new
This slide is
developments.
a little busy. I'll try to distill it down for everyone. So basically, in the bottom of this chart, we are showing sort of different levels of rent, ranging on the left-hand side, rents that are below $1,000, in the middle, sort of rents between $1,000 and $1,500. Those are those bar charts. And on the right-hand side, rents above $1,500 a month. The gray bars are the number of units that fell into those categories in 2010. And the sort of orange bars are the units that fell into those categories in 2019. We have seen huge movement in this corridor towards the right-hand side of this chart, towards being more expensive. The number of units available below $1,000 a month, which for this corridor more approximates what is affordable to the median household, has fallen very significantly in the past decade. The number of units, between $1,000 and $1,500, has increased very significantly. And in 2010, there were virtually no housing units that cost more than $1,500. Now there are many, as you can see on the right. Ultimately, in 2019, 74% of the housing units on this corridor sort of meet that threshold of being under $1,500. But only 36% meet the threshold of being under $1,000 a month, which is more affordable to the residents that live in the corridor. And even that 74%, the equivalent of that in 2010, based upon 2010 pricing levels, was that 94% of units were affordable to the median household in Wake County. So it's sort of fallen by 20% by that metric in 10 years. We go to the next slide. Want to talk a little bit about dedicated affordable housing, which is really what we mean by this is regulated, subsidized affordable housing, that is, sort of regulated and governed to be affordable. 37% of units in the corridor are regulated affordable housing and are receiving some form of subsidy. In the yellow box on the right, we're just noting what some of these are. This includes low-income housing tax credit units. This includes units controlled by the Raleigh Housing Authority. If we go to the next slide. So that's 37%, 1,600 active subsidized units on the corridor. This includes significant projects like Washington Terrace, for instance. And there is also a pipeline of these projects that are being delivered. For instance, New Bern Crossing outside the Beltline, the Milner Commons project, which is a senior housing project being delivered by DHIC close to New Bern Ave. And right across the street from that is a big project that the city is advancing, Duplex Village, which combines, sort of a city retaining a portion of that site to deliver affordable housing units with a private developer controlling the rest of the site to deliver a mixed-use project. So there is more housing in the works for sure. We go to the next slide. Also just want to focus a little bit on single family as the key part of this equation as well. There are, in recent years, we've tracked over 100 building permits for single family units. This includes new construction, additions, significant rehab. The vast majority of that is in the portion of the corridor closer to downtown. And on the next slide, we can see that in terms of housing values, so these charts at the bottom are tracking basically the past decade of housing price appreciation in the city of Raleigh and in the 2 zip codes that primarily comprise this corridor. In the city of Raleigh, you can see as a whole, or sorry, the Raleigh MSA, so the region as a whole. In the region as a whole, there's been 58% increase in home values indexed, over the past decade. In the corridor, though, for those 2 zip codes, the zip code that comprises the majority of the corridor has been increasing significantly more than that, almost 80%. And the zip code closest to downtown has appreciated 95%. So it is effectively doubled. So even amongst all of this growth and the statistics I shared earlier about sort of the region as a whole, this corridor is experiencing that much more housing price pressure and appreciation. Go to the next slide. This means that there is a growing affordability gap that we see happening in real time. So this is just showing sort of the median sales price, which is the 2 dashed lines in 2016 versus 2019. Just in that 3-year period, it went from $203,000 to $280,000 median sales price. In 2016, that median home was available, to the median household income, so to speak, for instance, of Black headed households in the corridor, of Latinx headed households in the corridor. The median, income for a Black household or a Latinx household was, sort of higher than that 203,000 in terms of being able to afford that. If you look at 2019, those 2 bars have now fallen below that median income. And in terms of another group, households headed by someone that has no higher than a high school diploma in terms of their educational attainment, that gap has grown very significant by 2019. So we see these affordability pressures having real impacts and who has the really the income to be able to afford housing in the corridor. And the next slide is really also just highlighting property taxes as another implication of this. So as values are going up, assessments rise. And this high property tax burden can create a particular burden on people that are on a fixed income, including seniors, who are not sort of in the market for housing, are settled in a home as a homeowner, long-term renter, but either face direct property taxes or experience increasing rents to sort of compensate for those increases in taxes. So that is a significant variable for many households on the corridor. The last slide here, before I hand over to Will to talk through the city's affordable housing toolkit, is really just highlighting then, that there are a variety of ways that these pressures manifest for community. For existing homeowners, it could be predatory purchase offers where, the offer, which might seem good, is actually, because there's been such appreciation, is below what can be obtained on the market. For new buyers experiencing rapidly rising prices, bidding wars, competing with all cash offers, or folks who have relocated to Raleigh, maybe they, from a more expensive market, sold their house in that market, then move here. And, relatively, it could be that, housing could be more affordable to those buyers. So competing with, folks in that bucket. And renters, who are renting single family housing, can face rising rents, potentially, the threat of eviction in the long term. So a variety of issues that we want to highlight and want to start, and really focus on solutions as we move forward with the conversation. So, well,
I'm gonna have to follow Kyle, which may be able to talk to give these all the time, and I haven't given one of these in at least a few years, so, please hang with me, and thanks for being here. So I'm Will Hardy with the City of Raleigh's Housing and Neighborhoods Department, particularly the Community Development Division. There's 3 divisions in housing and neighborhoods: community, enrichment, community development, and code enforcement. Go ahead. Flip to the next slide. So brief agenda here, just the city goals and priorities, at least as far as our latest action plan, funding sources, other current tools, and future tools. We can go to the next slide, please. So the increase the supply of affordable housing, which is the one we'll really be talking about today. The others are enhance the homeless to housing continuum, increase services to build self-sufficiency and sustainability. So funding sources. This is showing the annual allocation that we usually get, or that we got last year, not including recovery funds. So between CDBG, home, and ESG, we normally get around 5 million annually. Slide. And local funding, Kyle mentioned it before, what's sometimes called the penny on the tax rate, gives us around 6 million a year. He also mentioned that the bond was passed. We'll talk more about that. And then just revenue from programs and past bonds. Before we jump into current tools, I just wanted to note that although that seems like a decent amount of funding, that's not a given every year, especially the recovery funds that we have this year. Those, we may not see that kind of money again. So the good news is we do have this money now, and that's one of the tools. Other tools, some zoning ones. The first being what I think is a big one, and that's the missing middle text change to the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO. That essentially allows duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and some other unit types by right in a lot of the city, where previously only single family was allowed. Parking reduction, that's already in the UDO, 1 unit or 1 space per unit. That's the reduction of half, since it's normally 2. There was also the cottage courts text change, which I believe was the last one was last year. And that's a relatively new typology to Raleigh, especially, none have been built recently except for one off Glenwood that was not really geared towards affordable housing. And so we went back to the drawing board and worked with the text change on that. And it's actually proposed to be used at the Lane Idlewild site along this corridor, 1.17 acres. Next slide, please. We also have some equity programs. Preservation of NOAA isn't necessarily recognized as an equity program, but I think it can work like that. We have the rehab programs. If you live in your home and meet you're under a certain income AMI, and you have major things wrong with your house, you can get up to $90,000 on the substantial rehabs. The home buyer assistance program, that's for citywide. If you income qualify, you can get up to $20,000 that steps back over time to eventually be forgiven, and down payment assistance. And again, that can be used anywhere. I mentioned pandemic rental assistance. I kind of touched on recovery funds earlier, but just to give you an example, so the CDBG, we got around 3-something million in regular entitlement allocation. In just the CDBG CV funds, the coronavirus funds, we got 4.5 million for the CDBG and even more for ESG. That was the biggest bump, was in ESG, because normally we just get 275,000 and we got millions this year. The bulk of that is going to rental assistance to help keep people in their units who have fallen behind, may have lost their job. We also work with DHIC. Natalie Britt from DHIC was here last night. We work with them to provide not only, so if you buy one of our units, you're required to go through the first time home buyer training class, which we do along with DHIC, but it's also available to other folks if they want to take it at a very, I think the cost the last time I checked was $20, and you get a lot of good information there. So I usually advise people who might not even be trying to income qualify to take that class if they haven't before and they're looking at buying a home. Legal assistance. So that's taken on various forms lately because of the pandemic. That's eviction prevention. So trying to work with legal aid on making sure that, folks are getting evicted. It's, for legal reasons and not kind of more displacement concerns. Anti-predatory purchase outreach. So we also work with legal aid, DHIC, some other organizations on this to put together flyers to distribute to areas that are experiencing a lot of pressure to sell their properties. And these flyers were just one-pagers that kind of give, an overview of their rights and people that they can contact if they want to get more information. Workforce development. We work with the Home Builders Association on job training, also Fathers Forever and Passage Home. Some of this has been put off because of the pandemic, but we hope to restart it when things improve a little bit more. Next slide, please. So other tools that we have, the city also has its own rental portfolio. We have 220 units and they're deeply affordable. The first year you qualify, you have to be under 50% AMI. And those units, a lot of them are actually on corridor, some directly on New Bern or Edenton themselves. Other areas that we're working on, Martin Haywood, which is not too far from here, but that's kind of coming down the line, just 10 lots left. South Park, a little further from the corridor, but that's where we're working on a lot of rental development. There's a little bit more land there for us to work with than we do either on this corridor or in Martin Haywood. One thing that it hasn't been released yet, but it's in the final stages, is a notice of funding availability, a NOFA. It's going to include up to 10 million in funding, and then also building sites that the city still controls. Most of them are small scale, or pretty much all of them are, but via long-term land lease, and it's to support the creation of non-congregate, emergency shelter, transitional housing, and other rental projects. And you can see that the income targeting above at least a third to under 30% AMI. Once it goes up, it'll be posted for 90 days, and we anticipate it'll probably go up in the next few weeks. This kind of what we just talked about, the different focus areas for rental, Summit at Sawyer, which is South Park. Same thing for Two on Place. Booker Park South is what DHIC is going to do just below Booker Park North. And I think they're aiming for townhomes But with the pandemic, a lot of things are still in flux. Home ownership, we mentioned Martin Haywood, mentioned Lane Idlewild, and then East College Park. Tim from Evergreen is here. He's been working with us on this project. Go to the next slide, please. Just included a before and after of just one of the homes in East College Park. Tim, I'm not sure if that's yours or not, but if it is, great job. Next slide, please. And that's just an example of a rehab in East College Park where, you know, the homes almost look the same, but it's been updated so that that person was able to stay in place in East College Park. And with East College Park and some of our other projects, and no one, of course, is forced to leave. We try and help people who want to stay there with rehab projects. And a lot of East College Park was more landlord, dilapidated, that we bought up over time, starting decades ago. Next slide, please. Current tools and programs, again, low-income housing tax credit. There's 4% and 9% deals. 9% were extremely competitive. We use local and home funds to help leverage. More about that later with the bond. Loans are available for preserving existing rentals and or building new. A lot of our projects are new, but there's still opportunity. It's still available for existing, if anybody's interested. Amy's our contact on that. Slide, please. So moving to kind of the future tools. Kyle's going to talk more about this after I'm done, but the transit-oriented development overlay, which we're seeking to have council put in place soon, would allow additional density in return for affordable housing, parking reductions, prohibits our audio-oriented uses, 50% height bonus in exchange for providing 20% of the bonus residential units as affordable to 60% AMI for 30 years. I know it's a mouthful. Again, Kyle's probably going to add more color to that later. And it also will prohibit using rezonings to get around it. Next, please. So, $80 million bond last year passed 72% of the vote. I think that was a record. That's great. Here are the buckets. So TOD site acquisition, public-private partnerships, LIHTC gap financing, and rehab, owner-occupied home rehab, and down payment assistance. So a lot of those are ones we've already talked about. It's just putting a lot more money towards it. How that will break down on the next slide. For TOD acquisition, it'll be 16 million, and it'll be front-loaded towards the first 2 years. I'll add the caveat that this went before council. They gave their blessing, but it's still not until the RFPs and the NOFAs go out. Details still subject to change, but 6 million annually for direct acquisition of sites. 2 million annually for acquisition and preservation of existing affordable units via the RFP process. Next slide, please. Public-private partnerships, 28 million. This is, I think, the biggest pot. Phased over 5 years. FY22, 3 million for healing transitions, 7 million for permanent supportive housing, and also in FY22, 2 million annually for small scale nonprofit projects via the RFP process, 1/3, 30% AMI targeting, multiple cycles. And then you see that the next fiscal year, 2 million annually for voluntary inclusionary rental projects in transit. Next slide, please. LIHTC gap financing. So 4.8 million annually for each of the 5 years, and minimum income targeting would be a quarter of the units in 9% tax credit projects and 10% of the units in 4% tax credit projects must be below, or must be at or below 30% AMI. Next slide, please. Owner occupied home rehabilitation, $6 million. So expanding the existing program. I believe they've lowered the AMI requirement on that as well. It used to be 80%. I think now it's closer to 50 or 60%. And geographic, so closer to transit will also be more, will be considered more. Down payment assistance, $6 million. We kind of talked about this one before as well, but it's just expanding the program and targeting it near transit. Beginning in FY 23, 1.5 million annually. Next slide, please. So going back to us getting around 12 million from our reoccurring resources annually, the bond is going to give us 25 million in just FY 22 alone. So just kind of getting back to the impact of what we may have more money now than we've ever had. Hoping it to distribute it to some of you all to help create some more affordable housing. Next slide, please. So other future tools and programs, the AHIP, the Affordable Housing Improvement Plan, will be updated to look at more UDO obstacles to affording housing typologies, whether that be supportive housing, and then smaller units like single room occupancy units, SROs, and micro units. Tiny homes, that's a text change that's actually pending right now and would allow tiny homes in areas of Raleigh. Anti-predatory purchase programs probably increase our targeting there. That was one of the recommendations included in the equitable development around transit tool book that Kyle mentioned and Jason worked hard on. And then also, we're going to try and use the federal recovery funds that we've received and continue to receive to build, hope we can build more long-term capital assets so that it can be something that lasts more into the future than just a single shot. Yeah, next one. The equity fund, this is still kind of something in flux, but it was a main recommendation of the EDAP process. And the idea is that it captures some of the revenue from improvements along the corridor and plows it back into equity programs such as more affordable housing, or also programming, to go to community organizations working on a number of different things, from homelessness to pedestrian safety to other issues that we see or could see in the corridor. And the recommendations that extensive community input be a part of any decision on that. Whether or not it will be a synthetic fifth or through the general fund is still something that's being decided. All right, that's it for me. I think we can go into to Kyle's little deeper dive on the TOD overlay.
Thanks, Will. So I'll be pretty quick on this before we then get into our sort of breakout discussion to talk about solutions. Because this is, sort of advancing towards council, and a lot of thought has gone into the design of this TOD overlay, and the revisions to it, the density bonus that would be available through it. Wanted to just sort of highlight a couple aspects of it and talk about it a little bit. So, as Will sort of mentioned, there were a lot of when we say 50% bonus for providing 20% of units, or 20% of new bonus units affordable at 60% AMI for 30 years, there's, right there, there's 4 variables. And the key to, we think to designing this bonus is trying to calibrate it so that it is achieving, a high level of a high number of affordable units, that those are as deeply affordable as possible. With, sort of project feasibility, real estate economics, and, those types of considerations. We go to the next slide. What we did was build a HRA, sort of build a real estate pro forma, conceptual pro forma that we tested in different BRT corridors throughout the city based upon sort of current prevailing, sort of rents, construction prices, et cetera, to really test how the model would impact land values in the corridor. And then sort of analyze then, what this could mean in terms of incorporating affordable units alongside this density. So on the next slide, basically, we start with a project, sort of real estate economics 101. The project value is composed of, sort of the total development costs, including of the project, including the financing cost, the assumed return that's accrued to the developer, and the land value is, sort of the residual that we think of as the price of entry for doing that project is another key part of it. With the density bonus, you can then deliver a bigger project. And all of these things are enhanced. Building a bigger project entails more hard costs, more soft costs, additional financing costs. On this bigger project, developer is, going to be seeking a bigger return, even if it is the same percentage return. There is, for this bigger project, with the density bonus, we assume it is the entitlements that are allowing this bigger project to happen. There is already a market for it. So there, there is a sort of an additional willingness to pay for land. That residual land value increases as well. The theory of the bonus, if we go to the next slide, is really to capture, a portion of that additional land value and developer return that is realized by being able to build a larger project with this larger entitlement. It is an entirely voluntary concept. As in several other states, the understanding that is that in order to achieve these kinds of affordable units, the program needs to be of a voluntary nature, like this density bonus, as it's calibrated. So, if we go to the next slide. Based upon our analysis, we calculated that for, we looked at sort of mid-rise projects in the BRT corridors, and then sort of projects in downtown high-rises. What would seem to be a feasible, affordable set-aside of bonus units with different development contracts? Generally, our model was suggesting in downtown that was up to 6% of units, of bonus units at 60% AMI, and 28% of units in the corridors that could be carried with this density bonus. If we go to the next slide, this has then led to discussion with Planning Commission, a lot of internal, discussion. The goal is to create a program that works, is feasible. If it's not feasible, if developers don't opt into using it, it won't produce any units. It will be as if, there is really no enhancement to the baseline sale. So the recommendation has been that the program be calibrated at around 20% of bonus units be affordable. And that is the version of this that has sort of exited out of Planning Commission is advancing towards City Council, that 20% of bonus units be affordable. We go to the next slide. So what does this mean? This means if you had an existing site today, let's say that it can accommodate 50 units. And by the way, the vast majority of these corridors, including New Bern, are zoned at a height of 3 stories in the areas where they are feasible for multifamily. They're not just R zones. So those corridors can then be developed with the bonus up to 5. In this hypothetical conceptual example, you're then able to deliver, sort of 50% more units, 75 total units. 20% of those bonus units are affordable at 60% AMI, which is 5 out of the 75 total units. Essentially 7% of the total units in the project would be affordable at 60% AMI, and the entitlement is effectively increased by 50%. We go to this last slide here. Just want to note that we do this work in recognition of, several other cities that have calibrated sort of similar programs. And what has worked and what hasn't. I know the text is pretty small here, but, for instance, Atlanta, in 2 areas within the city, the Beltline, as well as the West Side Overlay District, has created a similar sort of affordable density bonus. That is only providing a 15% bonus. It is requiring 10% of units be affordable at 60% AMI, and that's total units, so it's a little more than the 7% being proposed here, although that is only for 20-year term, not a 30-year term. But, when you look at those different variables, pretty similar to Raleigh's program, and it has produced, over 380 units in only a very short time. You look at Winston-Salem's program, which has existed for 25 years, and it was requiring fully 40% of units be affordable at 60% AMI. It has not produced any units because it's not, well calibrated. This isn't just a matter of, sort of Atlanta may be a stronger market than Winston-Salem. It also gets into the sort of what the incremental value actually is in terms of the bonus. Another example I'm familiar with is Austin, which, like Raleigh, is a very strong state. It has implemented programs like this throughout the city in different contexts, in different market contexts. And they've experienced mixed success. In talking with them about, what is driving that, one of the fundamental factors is a lot of the corridors are essentially zoned right now for 5 stories. And that's what developers want to build. They want to build a 5-story Texas donut. That's what the market is there for. So there isn't, once the bonus is available, there's not necessarily a drive to use it. Our hope is that in Raleigh, where, much of these corridors are 3 stories, going to 5 stories is a meaningful increment to match where the market is, and can drive greater adoption and, sort of more results along the lines of what's being achieved in that. So that's the last slide on this, but we can definitely discuss more in our discussion groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. So I think you heard that there are a lot of resources and tools that exist, some that are in process. So that affordable height bonus right now that is not mapped anywhere, at least along the New Bern corridor. So what's up for discussion as a part of this planning process along New Bern is going to be what additional regulatory changes, what additional public investments, what kind of things from the private side and nonprofit side can we combine to make sure that we're addressing this need for housing affordability on the corridor. So what we'd like to do now is really hear from y'all about what you think is going to be successful, what the most important tools and strategies and investments might be. We'd like to set up both online and in person some separate groups to talk about that. And actually for y'all in the room, I'm curious how many are interested and more focused on homeownership and maybe the single family side of things, and how many are more interested in multifamily rental side of things? How many interested in multifamily rental? But just about everybody in the room. So let's set up 2 groups, and Kyle and Craig can each facilitate one of those groups. So maybe kind of just dividing in half, and we'll have a group over here where Kyle is and a group over here where Craig is. And then for those of you online, we're also gonna create 2 groups, and Jake, who is on, also works with Kyle from HRNA, is going to be facilitating one of those groups, and Ira Mabel, who is with the city of Raleigh, is going to facilitate the other group with some assistance from John Anagnost And let's get started. And again, thanks for bearing with any little technical issues as we get this set up.
Hi, everybody. Sorry while I try and transition. I'm going to let people unmute themselves now.
And Ira, we're going into two groups, right?
I think so. Jason was just telling me that we're going to have a group for single family and a group for multifamily developers.
Yeah, I think we could get a anyone to speak up if they want to speak about single family. I think at least in person it sounded like more or less everyone wanted to talk about multifamily, so we could just divide into two general groups and
Sure.
yeah.
What I'm hoping to happen is that this will let people pick when I start the breakout rooms. I will put Jake in one right now and me in one. And hopefully this will work okay. And
Yeah, I'll probably focus on multifamily. So if anyone is interested in single family, I would go to Ira's group. But I imagine most of the conversations will
all right.
both be on multifamily.
So we'll see y'all hopefully. When you join, can you tell me if it's breakout sessions or is it asking you to good morning. Are people interested in joining a breakout session? You should have an option in I think the participants window maybe, or there should be a notice. I'm seeing a little something different, but if you'd like to join one of the breakout sessions, please feel free. Hey. Oh, I can't hear you anymore. You're muted.
I'm muted, yeah, I was saying, are we gonna bring it back together for the virtual participants, or are we just? Are we gonna-
Yeah, I think we want to just give them some closeout, like tell them about other events that are coming up. Were you guys mostly winding down?
I think a lot of people left. from the
Oh, okay.
conference.
Well, whoever's left, we can tell them about like the workshops and stuff. Oh, all right. Um, so it looks like the other breakout session mostly left. I'll just say thank you everyone for coming. Very much appreciate your time. You know, couple other things. We have a few workshops, sort of open house style coming up. One next week in the Tarboro Road Community Center. Staff will be there basically all day, Monday through Thursday. If you want to drop in, there's going to be a special public kickoff on Monday night at 7 o'clock, I think, 6 or 7. We'll be there. And then we'll have 2 more of those sessions later in October for other parts of the corridor. And we also have a workshop similar to this one, but for walking and biking. And that's coming up also in October. And all that stuff I think was advertised in the time for this meeting. I don't have the dates in front of me. I really just want to thank everyone for coming, and hope you stay involved. Anything else, John? Parting words?
Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you all.